Welcome everybody to the channel. These are my top 25 college football teams. Number 25 is Kansas. Jalen Daniels is back. What a return for him. He led Kansas to a 34-23 victory, which was way more brutal than it sounds, as it was a 21-point lead at halftime. He had himself 277 yards and 2 touchdowns. Neal and Highshaw added 218 yards on the ground. They made Illinois' defense look stupid. Their defense also picked off 2 interceptions, looking good against Illinois. Not sure about other teams, but they get a freebie against Nevada next week, so expect them to see them in the top 25. Number 24, Tulane. In a loss to Ole Miss 37-20, there are positives to take away. That is, they looked like the better team in the beginning. Backup quarterback Kai Horton didn't play too bad, passing for 231 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. The problem is that the run game is just unexciting. They hardly ever ran for more than 5 yards, despite Mekhi Hughes finishing with 92 yards on 23 carries. For a rushing team, few plays went in their favor, and Ole Miss took advantage of that several times. Their run defense is still there, but they'll have trouble playing good quarterbacks. Number 23, Miami. This was the best Tyler Van Dyke game I can remember. I'll apologize for saying he is not it, as he played great this game. He dined for 374 yards and 5 touchdowns. He made the right play almost every pass, and they exploded in the second half to beat Texas A&M at home 48-33. They made everything hard for Connor Weigman, getting a late interception to seal the game. This team is the real deal, and that's why they're in my top 25. 22, Clemson. This game took a while to get going, but Cade Klubnik finished with 315 yards and 4 touchdowns. This team also shows their rushing attack, rushing for 274 yards and 3 touchdowns. Their offense limited Charleston Southern to 17 points, none of which coming in the second half. Receivers look alright, the run defense is stronger than it was last game, and Clemson has finally warmed up. 21, Oregon State. On their very first offensive play, Damian Martinez ran for a 64-yard touchdown en route to their 55-7 victory. They made quick work of Davis and rested their starters pretty early, but what we saw from them was enough to say this team is now confident. Number 20, Ole Miss. I honestly thought Tulane was going to win, but Ole Miss played so good and smashed Tulane in the second half, winning 37-20. Jackson Dart had another great game, passing for 267 yards and rushing for 41. Dayton Wade caught 7 passes for 106 yards. Defense shut down Tulane, forcing 3 turnovers on downs. They are real, and Ole Miss is coming for the SEC West. Stop sleeping on them. 19, Colorado. Although Nebraska ate them up, there's still so much upside with this team. It's obvious they prioritize skill positions, and this is usually 50-50 in college, especially against teams like Nebraska. But just like against TCU, Colorado turned it up in the second half, basically ending the game in the third quarter. They have so many talented players who are actually step up, and this is such a good thing. Number 18, Oklahoma. The Sooners were up by only 3 points in the fourth quarter, but 2 Dylan Gabriel passes advanced them past SMU 28-11. While others look at this game as Oklahoma barely winning, I see this as a big win because holding this SMU offense to only 1 touchdown is really impressive. They forced 2 turnovers and always look like the better team as they should. Gabriel passed for 4 touchdowns and Walker rushed for 117 yards. The biggest drop in this video will be Texas A&M. This was a tough game. They traveled to Miami to take on a real high-energy team. I don't blame them for losing. Connor Weigman played great, I thought. It's just that Van Dyke played perfect. They couldn't have done any more to stop Miami, so I'll only move them down 3 spots. They're still really talented, and if anything, this game shows the Aggies what they need to work on. That is their pass defense. Utah. There's a reason I had them much lower in my rankings last week than most others. I knew this was going to be a close game, and I'm glad they were able to run for 2 touchdowns in the last 2 minutes to win 20-13 in regulation. They couldn't get their offense going, but there's enough faith in their defense who we got to see stay strong as they won the time of possession game, having the ball for 36 minutes compared to Baylor's 24. Kansas State. Kansas State defeated Troy 42-13, giving the Trojans their first loss in September of last year. They led all the way. Khalid Duke had 2 sacks, and it was a pretty dominant performance overall. They got Missouri next week in what should be another blowout, as this team is really good. North Carolina. North Carolina survived an Appalachian State upset 40-34 in double overtime. Luckily, this defense stopped the Mountaineers from a touchdown, allowing Jake May to get an easy touchdown run. Speaking of May, he played pretty well, completing 70% of his passes. Omarion Hampton was a star as he ran for 234 yards on 26 carries and was electrifying. UNC is playing very different than they did last season, and I'm all for it if it means to control the tempo to win games. LSU. I'm surprised to see others have LSU outside their top 15 as they show many good qualities against Florida State, such as their run game. Against Grambling State, the Tigers won 72-10, and just like against FSU, Jalen Daniels showed he can pass. His receivers played much better, and he finished with 269 yards and 5 touchdowns. The defense looked good against a bad Grambling State offense. Tennessee. I've seen a lot of concern for this team, but at the end of the day, they still walked out victorious 30-13, even if they did play Austin Peay. It was slow as they let up 29 completions and had that one fumble loss. Defense had 7 sacks, which is what they had against Virginia. That's where most of my hope lies with this team. Those front guys are big and lengthy. Oregon. Oregon jumps Tennessee after a heroic comeback against Texas Tech. They outscored the Red Raiders 20-3 in the fourth quarter with their defense stepping up, even getting a game-sealing pick 6. I wasn't surprised this was a close game, as Texas Tech is a very talented team. I loved how Oregon stayed in this one. Bo Nix passed for 359 yards, 103 of which to Troy Franklin. This one is massive for Oregon, especially because this could have ended way worse. Washington. I'm still not impressed by Michael Penix Jr. as much as everyone else is. Yeah, he had 409 yards and 3 touchdowns to only 1 interception. He plays really good, so I guess it's his left-handedness that gets me. It's so different. And just like last week, this defense is what sells this team as a top 10 team. They won 43-10, not just because Tulsa is bad, but because the defense is tough to score on. Still, no need for a run game as Penix continues his Heisman campaign. Notre Dame. I wasn't ecstatic about this game, but that's not taking anything away from Notre Dame. There was a point in the third quarter when it was just a one-score game, but when Notre Dame is just so good, you know they'll finish the game blowing out their opponent, and that's exactly what happened. Estime had another good game. He had an 80-yard rush and 2 touchdowns. Hartman had 4 touchdowns and still hasn't thrown an interception. And while it looks concerning that a bad NC State offense scored 24 points, there's really no problem. Florida State. They blew out Southern Miss 66-13. USM's quarterback completed less than a third of his passes, while Jordan Travis also failed to complete half his passes. The difference is he didn't need to, as he still finished with 175 yards and 2 touchdowns. Trey Benson rushed for 79 yards and 3 touchdowns, and as a team, they had 306 yards on the ground, showing their rushing barrage. They have one more warm-up next week in Boston College before they go to Death Valley. Penn State. The Nittany Lions pounced on Delaware 63-7. They may be the best team in the Big Ten. We'll probably have to wait until conference play starts for them. I see how Nick Singleton is a Heisman candidate after he had 3 touchdowns in the first half. Outside one 66-yard run, Penn State showed no mercy. You'd love to see it. They're on the same tier as Ohio State and Texas when it comes to their total defense. USC. I almost moved them into my top 5 after they beat Stanford 56-10. Crazy. Caleb Williams added onto his resume with a perfect 281 yards and 3 touchdowns before sitting. Taj Washington and Zachariah Branch proved to be a reliable receiving duo. This defense got 9 tackles for loss, a Max Williams interception, and forced 2 fumbles which they recovered. Definitely the best that has looked in these first 3 games. USC just gets better and better and are playing like championship contenders. Ohio State. Another weak opponent, another blowout. This time they beat FCS Youngstown State 35-7. Devin Brown played more this game after Cal McCord got his first passing touchdown this year, coming along with 258 yards. I don't understand how the other rankings have the Buckeyes lower. They can't possibly blame Cal McCord, and they can't possibly blame a top 5 defense. Alabama. This team was inferior to Texas in every way. In my preseason, I ranked Alabama behind Texas, but moved them ahead last week because I thought Milroe looked fine. But this Texas defense forced 2 interceptions as they kept on getting to him. The offensive line was outmatched severely, and they couldn't get much of a run game at all. This is a wake-up call for the Crimson Tide as Quinn Ewers and the Texas offense picked them apart. The linebackers did a terrible job, and they just couldn't recognize any of Texas' plays and just let them score repeatedly. Michigan. Another outstanding performance from J.J. McCarthy as he led his team to a 35-0 victory, playing nearly perfect, going 22 for 25 with 278 passing yards. This offense looks so composed, which is one reason they're higher than Ohio State. Additionally, their defense is nice. They stopped all 3 UNLV 4th down attempts, and Blake Corum ran for 80 yards, scoring 3 times. Even without Harbaugh, this team makes everything look so easy. Texas. My preseason number 2 is number 2 once again. Quinn Ewers played exactly how a number 1 recruit should play, passing for 349 yards and 3 touchdowns. Just straight up diming. Jatavion Sanders showed his great receiving ability, and this pass rush is insane. Anthony Hill Jr. had 2 sacks as part of Texas' 9 tackles for loss. This O-line looked better against Alabama than they did against Rice, which is absolutely insane. Texas is a team who always has talent, so it's good to see them winning now. Still my number 1 team, Georgia. They obliterated Ball State 45-3, scoring 31 points in the second quarter alone. This defense is just so good, and I'm not concerned at all with Carson Beck. We saw them experimenting this game. He passed a lot of different receivers, and this is basically preseason for him. Thank you for watching. These are my rankings. Let me know what you would change. See you next week.